Chevra, how are you? Today is Erev Shabbos Kodesh, Parshas Terumah. I hope everyone is gesund, stark, und freilich, begashmis und beruchnis. I hope everyone is healthy, strong, and happy physically and spiritually. Today we're in Chodesh Adar, and health and joy come together. As we all know, the month of Adar is Bari Mazlei, that shows how we emphasize joy in the entire month. The whole month represents a very powerful force of transformation, turning darkness into light and sad situations into happy situations, etc. And also the literal translation of Bari Mazli means the mazel of a Yid is strong in this month. But the Rabbi used to quote Bari, Miloshin Gesund, Bari Mazli, the Gesund is top form. Okay, today we're going to speak about a very general concept, which we've discussed many, many times, because that's the whole purpose of life, and that's elevating the physical and making this world a dwelling place for Hashem. But before we begin, we'll start with a pasuk, which later on in today's lesson, we will talk about even more in depth. And that's the pasuk that says, V'ani var v'lei eda, which is translated, I was a boor and did not understand. Like an animal was I with you. This is a pasuk from Tehillim, and the literal translation means that even though I was like an animal with you, nevertheless Hashem is so kind and generous that He is with us. But the Alter Rebbe, as we will see later on in today's lesson, in chapter 18 of the Tanya, he explains it in a profound way. But before we get to that, in this week's Parsha, we have one of the most famous psukim in the Torah, which is V'osu li mikdosh v'shachanti b'seicham. Make for me a dwelling place, and I will dwell in them. We're talking about the tabernacle, the Mishkan, and as is well known, the Maimer Azal in the words V'osu li mikdosh v'shachanti b'seicham. Make for me a sanctuary, and I will dwell in them. The question is, the sanctuary is a physical object. And then it says, V'shachanti b'soicham, I will dwell in them. So b'soichoi, loy nemar, it should have said b'soichoi in it. We're talking about an object. We say no. It says b'soicham, b'soich kol echad ve'echad mi Yisrael. So it means that Hashem is residing in every single Jew. So the simple meaning is that Hashem's presence in the Mishkan represented how Hashem is with us. As we spoke many times, when the Yidden would bring a carbon, Hashem's presence would come down, the fire from heaven. During all the holidays, there was different services, how we served Hashem in the Mishkan. So therefore, when Hashem is in the Mishkan and the Mikdash, that shows Hashem is with us as the nation. So V'asili Mikdash, V'shachanti B'soicham means make me a sanctuary, and my presence in the sanctuary represents how I am with the nation. But that's one interpretation. But according to Chassidus, more so, the meaning is more on a personal level. And why is this important? Just as a side point, we mentioned this also many times, that one of the great benefits of Torah HaChassidus is that it always interprets the mitzvah on a personal level, i.e., its spiritual significance. And this makes a huge difference. Why? Because without that, as we're going to come soon next week to Parshas HaMolek, Zachar, so the question is, where's the Amalek today? As we spoke many times, what relevance does it have? And the same thing is true. Now we can have Parshas Terumah, Parshas Tetzaveh, Vayakel, Pekudei, which seems to be like a repeat. But in any case, 4 parshas that are dedicated and focusing and giving great attention to the details of the construction of the Mishkan. Someone could ask, who cares? It's history. It's a story from 3,000 years ago. What relevance does it have today? So therefore we come to the inner dimension of Torah Chassidus that looks at every single thing and says, no, the physical expression might not be today, but its spiritual significance is as strong as ever. And this lends us to a whole new appreciation to the nitzchias, the eternal meaning and significance of the Torah, always, that never changes. So now, let's just talk for a second, in a way that everyone knows about, what the significance is in the Mishkan. So one example, a famous one that everyone knows is, the Gemara says, Tfilois b'mokoim karbonos tiknu. So that means that today we daven Shachas, Mincha, Ma'ariv, and there's many lessons that we take concerning our prayers that we learned and we knew from the sacrifices that were brought in the Mishkan and the Mikdash. So there you go. From something that happened 3,000 years ago, today, in the year Tavshin Pei Gimel 2023, it makes a difference according to halacha how we're davening. Fine. So that's just one example. But now let's make it even more personal in a way, and that is like, again, this is not my focus today, but just generally speaking, we're skimming over a couple of subjects general. So for example, we had the Kochik Kochim. The Kochik Kochim is the holiest of holies. No one was allowed to enter there. So in some places in Chassidus it discusses your mind is compared to the holy of holies. Lo yaver zor b'seicham. Don't let any alien thoughts enter your mind. Keep it holy. That's one example. So we're comparing the Kochik Kochim to your mind. Guess what? Then we have Mizbeach, the altar. What did we do on the altar? We brought animals. What's the animal? The animal in you. As Chassidus says, Nefesh HaBa'amis. So that's in the altar, in your heart. That's where you have to sacrifice, elevate, sublimate your animal soul towards Hashem. So again, we have the idea of an altar in our personal life, in our heart, and much of Chassidus is going to discuss similarities and look at the details of the Avodah, the service that's in the Mishkan and the Mishkan and Mikdash, and see how that translates itself in our personal development and spiritual growth and advancement. So therefore the relevance is extremely important. Okay, now, today we will focus on one aspect, and that is where the pasuk says that we should make atzei shittim, which means not only are the avodas of the Mishkan and Mikdash something that has a message for us today, but also in the construction. And so there's a mizbeach, like we said, there's a kochik kochim. By the way, there's a kiyar, a wash basin, there's a shulchan. Every single thing, the menorah, every single one of the objects represents something in our inner service to Hashem. Now, so too in the construction. There was the walls, the karoshim, there was the adonim, the sockets, the roof, etc., etc. So today we're going to focus on atzei shittim, where the pasuk says that we have to make those, the walls were made from atzei shittim. We're going to get to the Rashi Mitzvah Shem later. So here, again, we'll see how Chassidus, unbelievably so, sheds life and gives us a whole new dimension, a life and a light. So go over to a regular person, not too knowledgeable in Torah, and you ask him, so why was the Mishkan made from atzei shittim, which is translated as shittim wood, cedar, or arkia, I forgot how you pronounce it. Anyways, so they're going to say, you know what? It's like, for example, if a person is building a house or making renovations, and every single detail is worked out by the architect, and we discuss, okay, making walls. What sort of walls? I don't know. I'm just a layman. Okay, talk to the professional. He's going to show you a piece of paper. He's going to give you 10 options. This wood, that wood, the other wood. And he'll explain you, this wood is this wood is that, the other wood is the other thing. And then he might tell you, so what are you doing? A table, a bookcase, a wall? Okay, and they'll explain you the advantages of each sort of wood and how expensive it is. And you'll come to a conclusion what sort of wood you want to use. So, we're going to learn this pasuk. We should make the walls of the Mishkan from atzei shittim. Why atzei shittim? The Eibishter is the best manager and architect. So if he says you should use atzei shittim, so he knows what's best. He's the expert, he's the professional, and the Bnei Yisrael are the laymen. And the Eibishter tells us what we should use. Thank you. Now comes along Chassidus, based on the Gemara Madrasha Razal, as we'll soon see, but taking it a lot further. The word atzei shittim, and this is also, by the way, very famous and well known to Chabad Chassidim from the Hemshech Basi Lagani, which we learn every year, which the Friedrich Rebbe in the Maimer talks about this concept. Atzei shittim comes from the word shita. What does that mean? And this is the inner significance and the meaning behind the whole idea, and how general the message is and comprehensive to our whole service of Hashem and Yiddishkeit. What is the word Atzei Shittim? Shittim means shita, which is coming from the word hatoya, which means an inclination, a deviation. And the Gemara says, and we learn this out from the pasuk which says kisista ishtay. It's talking about the suspected adulteress, the saita. And the Gemara says, the pasuk says kisista ishtay, and Rashi brings down shetot midar chatznius. She did something which was, she was found in an uncompromising position. It doesn't mean necessarily she did something terrible. Now's not the place to get into the details, but she did something that was not 100% according to the Torah. But that wasn't necessarily, that doesn't mean that she did something that went further, but just, it was a slight deviation. And because of that slight deviation, we have to look at what happened next. So to make it simple, it's like you're driving down the highway, and there's a straight and narrow path. Now, you can make a right turn, you can make a left turn. So that's what it means over here. She took a turn. We don't know how far. Sometimes you say it all started with a left turn, and then before you knew it, we were flying over the cliff. Rahman al-Islam. But that's not what we're saying. We're saying we took a turn. We don't know where the turn went yet. Oh. So now, in the pasuk, when it says kisista ishtay, tot midak etznis, it's meant in the negative sense. She didn't follow the straight and narrow path. And from here we learn out, ein odom oiver aveira elim kein nichnas beiruch shtus. From the Isha Saita we learn out that a deviation means a foolishness. You know, it's like there's a bottle, and it says danger or warnings. You ignore the label. That's what it means over here. So, ein odom oiver aveira. A person doesn't commit a sin. Elim kein nichnas beiruch shtus. A spirit of folly, foolishness entered the person. He knew it's the wrong thing. He was told it's a danger zone, and still he did that. As the saying goes, why did you do that in the first place? You should have known what's going to happen. That's what it means. Comes along Chassidus and says, just like when we speak about making a right turn or a left turn, there's a good turn and there's a bad turn. There's a bad turn and there's a good turn. Like, if we say you made a left turn, that would be bad news. But if you made a right turn, that would be good news. What does it mean to make a right turn? That means there's the limited way of serving God. That's the straight and narrow path, so to speak. But then there's a level where you go into the super highway, into infinity. You transcend your limitations. You transcend your logic. And that's what means shtus digdusha. And that's what the Friedrich Rebbe talks about in Chassidus. And they bring a phenomenal story. That's the basis for this, and that's the story in the Gemara in Ksubis, Daf Yud Zayin. And it says the famous story of Reb Shmuel bar Reb Yitzchak, who used to dance in front of a chassan and kala. And when it came to this wedding, he would go all out. So much so, he would juggle hadassim, 3 branches. And Reb Zera saw the way Reb Shmuel bar Reb Yitzchak was conducting himself. Like, just imagine somebody dancing, doing somersaults, and acting like you know, for lack of a better word, we'll say like a party animal. Chas v'shalom, I don't mean it in a bad way. But in the context of what we're talking about, you'll soon see what I mean. So Reb Zera turned to Reb Shmuel bar Reb Yitzchak and said, "Come machzav lan Saba, you're embarrassing us." And Rashi says, "Shemazalvu b'kavod Talmidei Chachamim." It's unbecoming for a great scholar of your stature to conduct themselves in such a way. It's more like the simpletons dance wildly. But for a scholar and a Jewish spiritual leader and giant, it's unbecoming to conduct themselves in such a manner. Anyways, it says that Reb Shmuel bar Yitzchak passed away. Kinoch nafshei afsik amuda denahira beinoi l'kul alma. The Gemara says a phenomenal statement. When he passed away, at his resting place, there was some sort of shining light that emanated from his burial spot. And Rabbi Zayda said about it, it was because he conducted himself in such a way that he merited such a great revelation of godliness and a special residing of divinity only connected to him. And Rashi says what it means, that was Mesnai Kishoita, that he conducted himself as a fool. So we see this concept of foolishness going beyond the norm. Let's call it the new normal, in a better way. And this is why, we have good crazy and bad crazy. There's bad crazy, that's when you do a sin. There's good crazy, when you transcend your limitations. You shed your inhibitions, whatever it is. You go broad in serving Hashem. So now the question is, why? Why is it so important to do that, and to so much so, as the Gemara says, that this was his distinguished, outstanding quality that made him different than all the others, that he was a Misnai Kishoita, and we're using such a term that could be interpreted in a negative way, but we know over here that it means in a positive way. So the question is, what's so great about it? Why? So to understand it, I want to read to you a section in Tanya that I mentioned before from chapter 18, where the Alter Rebbe says the following. He talks about Hashem, and he says, Hashem is l'mayla min ha'seichel v'adas, v'les machshavat yisvei klal, no thoughts can grasp him. And he says, Hakol kipsim etzli yisborich, we're all considered like fools in relation to Hashem's infinity. And pesi yamen l'chol dovar, a fool believes everything. So the Alter Rebbe is talking over here about Jewish faith. And he calls the Jew, starting from Moshe Rabbeinu, that we are called the fools. And what does it mean over here? Not as something negative, not as something that shows on a weakness, but on a strength. I can't get into the whole story right now, but Jewish faith is not foolishness connected to ignorance. It's foolishness that transcends limitations, that transcends logic. And that's what Alter Rebbe says in chapter 18. Do yourself a favor. If you have a Tanya, look at it after this lesson. And then he says, Kidichsiv, Vani barvale eda, vehemus. I was like a boor that had no knowledge, and I was like an animal with you. Vani tomedimach, and I'm constantly with you. And here the Alter Rebbe says these phenomenal words. Kloimar, shebezesh ani bar ubehemus, ani tomedimach. It's not despite the fact, like I interpreted in the beginning of today's lesson, despite the fact that I was like an animal, Hashem was with me, because He's so kind, etc. No, it's not despite, it's because. Behemus yisimach, v'ani tamedimach, because I was like behemus yisimach, therefore v'ani tamedimach. When a Jew transcends his limitations, and in that sense he acts like an animal, because in a certain sense, we are all like fools in relation to infinity. Less machshavat tisabei. We cannot grasp with our intellect, because our intellect is too poor to be able to grasp infinity. We are limited, so therefore our intellect is limited. But through the power of faith, which means we get in touch with our divinity and our godly spark, our nefesh halikis, which is in us. When you go directly and tap into that nefesh halikis, that means that you act like a fool. You bypassed your limitations of logic, and you switch straight into godliness, which God is not a being which is limited by intellect. Okay, so now we see the Alter Rebbe's words clearly, and now back to our subject over here. So therefore now we understand why we have to act like shtos. Because kol shtos tekdusha, the good shtos. Because as long as we're acting just according to our intellect, so then that means that I'm just serving God according to my profile, according to my convenience, according to what works for me. But only when I really act in a way that it's with emunah, faith, and shtus tekdusha, where I go outside of my limitations, then I really know that my nefesh halikis, my pure divinity, has been activated, and I'm tapping into my true infinity, which has nothing to do with intellect, which is godliness, godliness itself. And what is godliness itself? I get in touch with my godliness itself through faith. And I try to tap into my godly soul. And that's what it means, good craziness. Now, to connect it in particular to the story of the Atzei Shittim, so let's go back for a second. Now we understand the beauty of the message. What does it mean that you should make the walls out of Atzei Shittim? This is what the mitzvah represents. This is what the idea is. My friend, Hashem is turning to us and telling us, take your mishegassen, the craziness of the world, and transform the craziness of the world and make it into craziness for Hashem. That's what it means. Now we understand the profundity of what does it mean. Why did we choose Atzei Shittim, that cedar wood? Not because it makes the best walls, etc., which I'm sure that's also true. But what's the real point? The point is, because this is the message about our whole, making this world a dwelling place for Hashem, to channel everything and transform everything. Transform craziness, negative craziness, into positive craziness in a good way. And don't serve God according to your constraints and your small box and your limitations, but go way beyond it. Now, this Rashi, I'm going to read you on the words Atzei Shittim, is totally in sync and it's beautiful. V'atzei Shittim, and Rashi says on this, how did they get wood in the wilderness, like the desert? Pirush Rebbe Tanchuma, Yaakov Avinu Tzofa Baruch HaKodesh, Sesin Yisrael, Livneis Mishkan B'midbar, V'hevi HaRozim L'Mitzrayim V'notom, V'tzivi L'bonav Litlo Mimoim Kishiyotzim Mitzrayim. Yaakov Avinu, when he went down to Egypt, he told them to take with them Atzei Shittim Arozim from Israel. They took the Atzei Shittim, and he told them to take those trees to Egypt when he had to go down to Egypt and plant them there. And then he told the sons that when they leave Egypt, they should take it with them. Think about this Rashi. It's so inspiring. It's so full of hope. Yaakov Avinu saw that one day, there's going to be a Mishkan. So how did the Jews, this is just a general question, how did the Jews keep faith when they were in concentration camp Pisam and Ramses, and they were in slavery, and it was horrific conditions, and Jewish children were being slaughtered? How did they keep the faith? How did they keep hope? And the answer is, one answer is they had a message of pocket pakadati. They were told one day a Redeemer will come along, that was Moshe Rabbeinu. But they also had a demonstrative object. That was an object of redemption. What was that? Trees. Physical evidence, a physical demonstration of a promise, of a message of Yaakov Avinu that told them, remember, my sons, my children, there's going to come a time where these trees are going to be used to construct a Mishkan. So this is also connected to faith. The whole idea of living, we're going to call it a dream for a lack of a better word, chas v'shalom, but I don't mean it as a dream. But I'm saying living with a promise and a guarantee and a faith in a Yaakov Avinu that tells his descendants that one day we're going to leave this exile. You're going to be in exile, and we're going to leave this exile and take these trees with you, because these trees will represent the construction of the Mishkan. So we see that the whole genesis, the origin of these trees is connected with the concept of faith. And this is the connection, my friends, to Chodesh Adar. What's the main Avodah in Chodesh Adar? The Avodah of Simcha. As is well known, the Maimon Azal concerning Simcha. Simcha Peretz Geder. Joy breaks boundaries. It's discussed in many places in Chassidus. And now's not the time to give all the different examples, but basically it means that when a person's in a good place and he's in a state of great joy, then he's able to go out of his limitations. And we see that clearly, like in general, when you're speaking, you say, the person's in a good place, he's in a bad place. When the person's in a good place and he's in a state of joy, it's all systems go, 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 go. But it doesn't only mean all systems go, that he's operating at maximum proficiency. It's more than that. he's operating on infinite proficiency. He's able to tap in and not only bring out a usual level of his faculties at the optimal level, but even beyond that, more than the optimal level, because every single person has levels of koiches that are bligvul, because we have a neshama, and the neshama is spiritual, and spiritual, anything which is spiritual, transcends the limits of the physical. So when a person serves the Eibishter b'simcha, then he's able to transcend his limitations. Just to give you a simple example that Chassidus talks about, is like when a person had a neighbor or a person that they were in a machlokes, and the example which is given is when it comes to the simchas b'nai yichidai, if it's your only son's wedding and you're in a state of ultimate joy, then even someone who you usually find annoying and you're in a dispute and you're not even talking to that person, Chassidus says, if it came to the point of your simcha and your highest level of simcha, not only would you tolerate someone that usually caused you great distress and pain, but you'd actually embrace that person warmly, and you'd be able to make up and become very good friends. Because simcha peiretz geder, when a person is in a state of joy, he's able to transcend all his limitations. So the lesson today is a tremendous lesson in Avodas Hashem. We learned the significance of the Mishkan. We learned the significance of Atzishitim. We learned about how important it is, the simcha of Simchas Adar, Simcha Peiretz Geder. So now, in Yiddish, when we say, it is gut mishuga, usually that meant in a negative way. He's not only crazy, he's like really crazy. But now we see the true interpretation. Gut mishuga meant good crazy in a good way. And if I remember correctly, there's a story they say about the Rebbe, that the Rebbe told somebody once by dollars, Ich bin mishuga auf Mashiach. I'm crazy for Mashiach. Which means that the Rebbe is obsessed with it in a good way, the way he's supposed to be. And the same thing is, we should be able to say about all of us. Ich bin mishuga auf Chesed, ich bin mishuga auf Tzedakah, ich bin mishuga auf Gemara, ich bin mishuga auf Chassidus. I'm crazy about davening. I'm crazy about charity. I'm crazy about kindness. I'm crazy about other people. I like to be involved with other people. So the Rebbe shall help that we should all be good mishuga in all positive ways. And through our avodah, going out of our limitations, we should break all the limitations of Golus. And this should bring us to the Gula Mitzvah Shlema, take it from Yad Mamish. Posting from my home, Be'ez Hashem Yisborech, your man in Melbourne.